Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the Mouthy Money podcast. I am joined, as ever, by my good colleague Chris Tuite, who is Head of Consumer Finance at MRM. Chris, good morning.
Morning, Ed. How are you doing?
Yes, not too bad today. I think we've got a subject that I've wanted to talk about for a long time, shall we say, and I've finally got a hook, and the hook is it is the 30th anniversary of the National Lottery this week, which is quite exciting.
I can remember the first draw.
Yeah.
The balls and all the rest of it. Guinevere. That's one for the kids. Sorry, Ed. Guinevere. What was the name of the other one? I can't remember the other one.
I have no idea. It's all King Arthur themed stuff, isn't it? Camelot and all that.
Well, Camelot, yeah.
Camelot exactly. Don't run it anymore, unfortunately. But the other hook, which actually is very fortunate this week, is that there's big Euro Million jackpot. So there was 140 million, I think it was on Tuesday. Nobody won that, so it's 158 this Friday. So, not inconsiderable amount of money. Now, this is a bit of a weird subject area for personal finance because, we arguably straying into things like gambling and stuff like that. We'll come to that a little bit later. We have, however, got a really interesting guest on to talk to us about what you would do if you won the lottery. So Duncan Horner, he's a director at Amber River Premier, which is part of Amber River Group, one of the UK's largest IFA firms. Duncan, welcome to the podcast.
Good morning, Ed. Morning, Chris.
Morning. Can I just be clear? I am intending to win on Friday, so I'm just seeing this as a pre-chat.
Your last podcast.
Let's get ahead. Well, yeah. Well, I'll do one on Friday if I win it.
Okay, tell us about
free financial advice, Chris.
Yeah, exactly. I might come to you afterwards, Duncan. We'll see. But this is all part of the preamble to the win.
So we've got Duncan joining us today, obviously to talk about, and this is the kind of, it's the moonshot conversation, is what would you do if you won the lottery? We have the good fortune that the Amber River Premier has a bit of experience with some lottery winners in the past. And I think, Duncan, if he doesn't mind me saying, they do have a lot of experience dealing with kind of people who have significant windfalls and how you deal with that and some of the approach. And actually, there's a lot more to it than you might necessarily think. We all kind of daydream about these things, but, there's practicalities of what do you do if you've suddenly got 150 million pounds in the bank account overnight? Now,
yeah, we want to turn your dream into something a bit more serious, listeners. Give you a bit more practical advice on how it would actually look.
That being said, we are going to do some daydreaming as well to kick us off, because that's good for social media, let's face it. Chris, you're not a regular. I dabble occasionally in the lottery. You are a recent new. I wouldn't call you a convert, but you've had a first go at it. Do you have a strategy? What's the plan?
My number game. I was thinking about this when I sat down to do Tuesday because I was aware we were going to have this chat, and obviously, like I said, intending to win. Unfortunately, it didn't work on Tuesday, but I thought. So the weird conspiracy theory part of my brain, because come with me, gentlemen. I'm going to take you on a trip. I watched a while ago a documentary called McMillions. It was on Sky, right? And it was the Monopoly game with McDonald's. And it turned out that was basically the mafia were deciding who would win that. So there's all these millionaires being made in America. So I have this kind of part of my brain kicked in with that. And I thought, well, actually, maybe if I pick my own numbers, they're never going to win. I need to do a lucky dip. Don't know why that came up. So I did a lucky dip. And then I thought, no, come on. You got to believe a bit more in, it's like tarot cards or star signs, isn't it? My numbers are lucky. So, did the usual thing, child's birthdays, house numbers, that kind of thing. So I have a dual strategy. I'm hedging my bets, Ed. And somewhere between that, we'll end up winning. What's your take?
So, I'm the complete opposite. I can't be bothered with doing numbers. I just ask them for the random, whatever it is. The other day, I bought one on Tuesday because, annoyingly, I was driving somewhere and I had to go into a petrol station to fill up my car, and they classic, put a big sign saying 140 million, and I was like, oh, all right. And I just say, can I have two, please? And they just put numbers on there, and I won £2.74 back on one of my lines, Chris. You'll be very happy to know.
There you
got
go.
my money back with a little bit of interest.
I think I agree with Chris's strategy. I think the sticking to your numbers theory. I don't know if you heard during the week there was a chap, I can't remember where exactly he was from, but he picked the same numbers for about 20, 30 years and hadn't won the big one, then decided to change his numbers only to find that had he have kept his numbers,
Oh no,
he would have won. I think it was over 100 million quid.
I suddenly feel really ill. Oh my word! Can you imagine?
You've got to stick to your guns on this.
Yeah.
Terrible.
I did have a thing in my granddad's house once. The Irish lottery. I'm from an Irish family, so I go over there in summer holidays, and I did have a moment where I thought my granddad had won the lottery, which was quite interesting because he was like, "Check this ticket, will you?" So I went and checked it and read the numbers where it had sort of lottery written on it, and I thought he'd written down the numbers from the draw, and they matched identically. And what I didn't realise was he'd just written down what numbers he was going to play before he took them. So I had like a 2-minute thing where I thought, he's won, oh my God. And then had the massive come down of realising you're just an idiot. So anyway, there we go.
So the next question is, right, obviously, how do you play it? Okay, fine, you do it this way. The next question is, what are you daydreaming about when you think about something like that? So I think you and I have discussed this before a little bit on the podcast, but I think maybe we'd be a little bit clearer this time because I think we were probably spent this time thinking about it last time.
Planning for Friday, Ed. Planning for Friday,
exactly. Yeah. So Chris, what's your?
So I think I originally gave sort of boring answers around, property. I think take that as a given, right? I'm going to buy myself a nice big house. I mean, I'm not a driver. So maybe I might learn to drive. That might be good. I'll do a crash course. And then I think I'll treat myself to a nice bike, maybe a box at Anfield, and then travel. So I might even buy some new clothes. I think that would be it. I'm not a jewelry guy. I'm not a watch guy. None of those things. I'm not interested in a muscle car. So I think, a nice sleek bike. I might put myself on some creative writing courses. Because let's face it, I won't have to work if I've got 150 odd million quid for a while. So I'll have to keep busy. And then obviously go and see Duncan and the guys at Amber River because, this thing needs to last. What about you, Ed?
Yeah, I think so. And this is in the context of the farmer protests. I think I might have secretly come up with a ludicrous plan to become landed gentry. So I'd have my little country pile, probably somewhere in the southwest.
Quite a big pile based on that amount of money, I imagine.
Yeah, with farmers' inheritance tax kind of money.
Next door to Jeremy Clarkson, fuming.
Yeah, well, not. Where is he? Is he Cotswolds? Probably not.
Yeah, I think he is.
Further southwest towards where I am now. Then I'd have my little lock up and go in central London, so that I'd have somewhere to stay when I go to the opera.
It's a given. We all need somewhere to stay when we go to the opera.
Yeah, and then it's the usual stuff, isn't it? Go travelling. I think I'd probably do like a overland camping trip in like Southern Africa or something like that.
You got 150 million quid.
Yeah,
get an Airbnb.
But Chris, obviously with a retinue,
right,
people looking after me.
Okay, right. Yeah, exactly.
And other stuff like that. I think it is a kind of a boring answer, but it's like you want to own a home that you never have to sell, kind of thing, right?
Yeah,
exactly.
Live
in forever. I do start getting very nervous when I go on things like Rightmove and I start looking around for like houses that cost £15 million and looking at it and thinking, "Cool, I wonder what the heating bills would be like in that house. That must be absolutely terrible." Just having very prosaic thoughts.
Wow,
these crazy
intrusive thoughts, Ed.
I know.
Your intrusive
thoughts. This council tax band must be horrendous, just that sort of thing.
Yeah, your council tax hobby horse will bite you in the bum, won't it?
Council tax,
there we go. Duncan, don't get him started, please.
Duncan, I know you're not a habitual lottery player. Do you have any daydreams like this though?
Well, let me give you my daydream. I put sort of my personal aspirations, and then I'll touch upon the professional view of things. No, I think like you guys. I think on a personal level, it would have to include a property, a house somewhere that's warm to escape to in the winter months. I'm a big sports fan, so I'd like to watch as many sort of live events, some of the big ticket stuff. Lions tours, Ashes tours, those sorts of things. In a bit of luxury, I think that's on the card. Not a huge one for cars, but no, it would be, and of course, supporting friends and family where I could. So yeah, all of those things. But on a professional side, I have to say this sounds a bit dull, but very often you are dealing with people that initially, at least, are in a bit of shock.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those wonderful ideas and plans that they've sort of thought about for years and years and years, the first emotion that they feel is probably a bit of shock and probably a bit of terror that they're going to suddenly lose it all.
So this is what we wanted to really dig into with Duncan is, and it's almost like, how do you, and I mean, for want of a better phrase, how do you war game somebody winning or coming, even just, if it's just a windfall of any kind, that kind of money? Like, are we setting aside a bit of fun money at the start, or are we just making sure everybody's paperwork is in order, because things like writing wills and all that kind of stuff must create a lot of jobs that need doing to ensure that this stuff is in the right place. What is the approach that you guys would kind of take in that sense?
Also on that, Duncan, when are they speaking to you? Like the day after, or
it's pretty soon after, Chris.
Right.
So we are introduced to the winners, as you say, fairly soon after the event has happened, and very often you're dealing with people that, as I say, are in a state of shock. So I think the first thing that I would highlight is you need to encourage people to take a bit of time, in fact, as much time as they need, to really let this soak in. I personally say to a lot of lottery winners, go away, go on your fantastic holiday for a good few weeks, because if nothing else, it gives you that breathing space. I think there are some practical points there, though, Ed. You've highlighted one, which is, I suppose, the legal side of things. At that sort of level of a lottery win, you are going to be bombarded by advisors, begging letters, all of those sorts of press intrusion. So you need to think about having a very good legal team around you to give you that element of protection. And dare I say, even sort of PR guys that may want to introduce you to the press or the public, via a sort of press day, those sorts of things. But from a financial standpoint, it sounds slightly dull, but it is a very practical point. Is one of the first questions is, where do I keep the money?
Yeah.
You can't stash it under the mattress.
You can't stash it under the mattress. You want something that is 100% secure, clearly. There aren't enough banks in this country to cover you under the 85,000 compensation limit.
I love the idea of knocking on everyone on the high street. Can you have some? Can you have some? Imagine remembering all those passwords. Nightmare. Anyway, there we go.
So very often you're dealing with organisations like National Savings. You're possibly thinking about investing in gilts. Anything that is typically backed by the UK government is going to give you that security that you would need for that sort of amount of money.
Yeah.
So it's a good place to park the money whilst you think about the longer term plan. But you mentioned it there, Ed. I mean, again, another important feature of this is you want to release an amount of money so that the winners can enjoy it. They can treat themselves in those first sort of few months to go on those holidays. So you try, where possible, to agree an immediate budget with them that will allow them to do the initial things that they'd always thought about, the trips with the family and friends and those sorts of things.
So the one interesting thing is thinking about how much a lottery winner might win, in the sense that there is a difference between winning, and it seems silly to say it, but there's a difference between winning 2 million quid and winning 150 million quid, right? Like 2 million quid, when you think about things like allowances and, tax implications of that, you're kind of buttoning yourself up for life. And that's probably the value of a very good pension and, and a nice house and that kind of thing. But it's kind of not a necessarily unusual amount of money for people who have done well in life to have these days, if that's fair to say. 150 million is kind of different planet, though, isn't it? You're talking about generational change in circumstances that your children and your grandchildren are probably going to be managing and looking after. So is there a difference in approach in that sense, in terms of scale?
Yeah, there absolutely is. And you're right to make that distinction. I think if it's £1 million to maybe sort of £4 or £5 million pound winner. Obviously, that's a huge amount of money for most people. But you're thinking about clearing debt. You're thinking about maximising tax allowances, but fundamentally, you're talking about an amount of money that hopefully, if it's managed correctly, will give them every chance for financial independence. In other words, getting to that point where they may not have to work ever again. Obviously, it depends on how much they think they're going to spend each year, but you're really only then looking at perhaps one or two options with that money. I think when you get to the 100 million plus category of winners, it's a very different conversation because, as you say, it's multi-generational. It facilitates things like charitable giving, perhaps setting up foundations. You've got to think in more detail around the legal structures. Clearly, inheritance tax becomes a much bigger issue.
So your farm will be in trouble, Ed. Your country pile.
Tax generally becomes perhaps a much bigger issue when you're dealing with those sorts of sums. But it is a different financial planning scenario, certainly.
Yeah. In terms of kind of, so you've won that 150 million, and essentially, if you set that up in the right way, you can kind of just generate income off that forever and kind of grow. It's that kind of old adage of you just live off the interest forever. Basically, you never have to touch any of it. Is there is that kind of money where you're setting up a family office almost, or creating a business around it to manage that? That it's like a significant endowment, basically, isn't it? What is the approach with that?
Yeah, it can be, and it justifies at least considering things like family office type structures or family investment company structures, where the inheritance tax benefits are significant potentially on those sorts of sums. What you very often want to try and avoid is obviously that money just sitting in single or joint ownership where there is that inheritance tax liability, and you only have to go through sort of 2 or 3 generations of inheritance tax against those numbers to reduce the headline figures down quite dramatically. So just like any other sort of financial plan, really, Ed, what we try to do with the winners is try to get to a stage where we're starting to think about their own requirements. And obviously that will be based on their age, their health, and a lot of other factors. But you're trying to agree a budget. I think the biggest problem that you have historically with lottery winners is very often they don't have an understanding of financial matters, perhaps for obvious reasons. They've never really had a lot of money to deal with. And they need guidance and advice in terms of what they're going to spend each year, potentially for the rest of their life. So you come up with the concept of a budget. That then, working backwards from that sort of gives you the idea of how much they're going to need as an asset base. And from that, you can have sort of secondary conversations around how much they can give away to family, to friends, to charities, those sorts of things. So I think, again, it sounds slightly obvious when you say it, but agreeing a budget is fundamental in the entire process and sticking to that budget.
Yeah. So just to be clear at the outset, there wouldn't be in the UK, is there any tax implications immediately when you win that, or is that money tax free?
Yeah, not on the win itself, Chris. It's tax free. But shortly afterwards, obviously, wherever you end up putting it, typically that's going to be in a UK bank account somewhere. You are going to be generating interest, and so it becomes taxable very quickly. So we'll talk to clients about the tax efficiency of various different structures. A lot of the times, clients will like the idea of gilts because depending on certain types of gilts, they're not generating huge amounts of income. Most of the returns that you get can be capital gains, but free of capital gains tax. So, yeah, you start thinking about tax mitigation very early on.
Yeah, and it's a basic fact of, we talk about inflation on the podcast all the time when we write about it. I mean, I'm writing about inflation almost on a weekly basis, and especially in the past couple of years. when you have that kind of money, inflation has a very big effect. The orders of magnitude of something like inflation, when you're talking about devaluing 150 million cash pot in 1 year by, inflation's 2.3% now, that's suddenly not a trifling amount of money, is it? It's a significant amount of money. So you have to do something in order to ensure that money is moving in the right direction almost straight away, don't you?
You do, Ed. You try to, again, a big part of this is educating the clients about the risks of inflation. But a lot of the lottery winners will be perhaps in their 20s and 30s. You're talking about 40, 50, 60 years worth of cash flow management, which, as you say, one of the big dangers there is going to be inflation. So you tend to structure the estate so that it's divided. It's divided between money that the winners can access, that they know they're going to spend perhaps in the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years. That is kept secure. It's safe. It's guaranteed. It's accessible money. But there is an element of their estate that has to be invested in a way that it has a chance of beating inflation over the long term. And whether that's putting together portfolios that would include things like stocks and shares or fixed interest, it's about having that balance so that over the longer term, to your point, Ed, these things are ticking along and trying to beat inflation and give you that real return.
Yeah. So there's a stat that actually I saw it the other day. Somebody was posting about the lottery. I think probably for similar reasons to why we're talking about it. To which somebody had commented, "Well, don't you know 70% of all lottery winners go bankrupt anyway?" And I thought that was an interesting figure. So I actually did a bit of digging on it, and it turns out that it is actually an apocryphal figure. So which is good to hear for a start. But for me, it underlines the point that there is a significant potential vulnerability here. And I know it sounds a bit silly when suddenly you're dealing with somebody who's become a multimillionaire overnight, but that's the point, isn't it? Is you're taking somebody who potentially doesn't have any financial experience at all, maybe, not really ever been interested in money or anything like that, and suddenly they've, been dealt this unbelievable hand. There's a big thing with vulnerability there, right? That you almost have to provide as an advisor to them. Would you say a form of pastoral care, maybe even?
Absolutely right, Ed. We would, as an organisation, we would treat lottery winners as vulnerable clients for the very reasons that you've highlighted. Unfortunately, at the time that you get to meet them, they will have possibly spoken to one or two friends, colleagues, and again, unfortunately, the initial advice that they receive is either ignored or it's the wrong type of advice. So it doesn't surprise me that historically, at least, a lot of lottery winners have ended up bankrupt. There's plenty of examples of that. They've never got to a situation where they've taken the right advice. They've never set budgets. They've spent far too much in the early years, and they run out. So these clients are vulnerable. And it takes a long time to build a network of trusted advisors, which is why very often you won't get to a final strategy with these winners for perhaps 6-12 months down the road, because the first 3-6 months they're still just getting scripted with what's happened, and they're still getting to know their advisors.
Yeah.
And to make sure that they're aligned with their best intentions.
I'm thinking of there's a sort of, it's analogous there with some top level sports people. Particularly, I'm a big boxing fan, and there are countless tales of boxers in their 20s and 30s who have made millions. Mike Tyson's a good example. Obviously, he's pretty relevant, and then have lost it all just because of being surrounded by the wrong people, giving them shoddy advice. And there's footballers as well. I think there was a few footballers. David James might be one who were caught up in sort of dodgy property investment vehicles and things like that. So it's younger people, not necessarily a track record of good financial acumen around them, and all of a sudden you find yourself taking a large fortune and it dwindling very quickly. So I'm not necessarily surprised to hear that. And the fact that you treat them as vulnerable is to your credit, I think, in that regard, because as you said, Ed, the initial reaction is 150 million quid doesn't make you vulnerable, but it does when you drill a bit down further into it. So,
we try to. What we try to do, we can't be 100% unrealistic on this. People are going to want to spend a fair chunk of this money, and absolutely right. But what we do try to agree with the winners is an amount that they can afford to lose should they want to. So those ideas, Chris, that might be coming from other people, friends, families, where it's an investment perhaps in something else, or they have an interest, a passion in something that they want to put money into, that's absolutely fine. And we completely accept that. What we try to encourage is having a core amount of their asset base that is purely there to give them that independence, so that if they end up losing in those investments with their friends or whatever it might be, it's not going to have a dramatic impact or a negative impact to the point that we now need to start worrying about how much they're spending.
I find it interesting as well, and Chris, actually, to your point about the kind of the sports star thing is, as sad as that is, that you do end up with these situations, you do also see sports people who've obviously, when they were young, have earned serious money, and I sometimes find it quite interesting to see what those people then go on to do when they're old, and they pop up running interesting things, don't they? Like you'll get like a celebrity who's obviously earned a lot of money as an actor maybe in their young years, and now they run the one off the top of my head is own like a gin brand or something like that, or they'll run a tequila farm or something. They diversify their money that they've earned into a range of really strange and interesting things. Does that happen a lot? You kind of quirky stuff that is actually quite successful.
Not that I mean, if I'm honest, not that I can think of. The classic playbook, if you like, whether it's lottery winners or your Premier League sort of footballers. Chris, you'll appreciate this as a Liverpool fan. It's typically property.
Mm-hmm.
They want to buy lots and lots of property, and whether it's the Robbie Fowlers of this world, you end up with.
We all live in a Robbie Fowler house, as we used to chant in the 90s.
We're, estates that are owned by one person or one footballer. So that tends to be the asset that they get stuck into straight away. But no.
That's kind of almost like a. It's to me that strikes me as quite just a British thing to do, because we all understand property and how it works. So it's like, I just buy a lot of property and become a landlord, basically, because it makes very easy sense to just do that instead of sticking it all in, global equities or whatever might actually probably provide a better return over the long. Not, we're not providing advice here, but it's less kind of it's tangible to people, isn't it? Holding property, and that's why we always go to that. Well, I'd buy a nice house type thing.
Yeah, it's tangible. You're brought up, aren't you, in this country, thinking, well, I need to buy a house, I need to own the house. If I have 2, 3, 4, 5, surely that means I'm in a better position. It's in our psyche, I think.
Yeah, it's really a lot of food for thought here, I think. It's a frivolous discussion.
Speak for yourself, Ed.
All right, Chris. We know you're going to win. It's fine. No, but
positive mental attitude.
Yeah, exactly. No, I think it's one of those stories I've always wanted to dig into, and I think the implications of it are almost much more profound than you think going into it, aren't they?
They are, and I suppose I touched upon some of the more practical points this morning about security and taking legal advice and making sure that you get the right teams in place. But fundamentally, any advisor would tell you the same sort of thing. It's about planning. It's about trying to get to a situation where you know what you can spend, and you know that you're going to be covered for the rest of your life. And at those levels, it's about setting up your family for potentially multiple generations, and that touches upon legal structures and very specialist advice. But ultimately, it boils down to the same thing, which is it's giving people the option of not ever having to work again, and making sure that all of their estate is safe, it's secure, it's tax efficient, it's growing, but also having a bit of fun at the same time.
It's a great point you make about the family stuff because, that is something I think once the whirlwind had settled down and I'm sipping my tequila on some desert island with factor 50 because I burn easily, too much information. I would be thinking, right, my daughters, what does their life look like? Because you've massively changed what the possibilities look like for them. Maybe for good, but maybe for ill as well. There's a lot to be said for good days, honest work. So it's like, well, how do you set up a structure that incentivizes them to do the things that I think are important values? Putting in being hardworking, not necessarily having to do it like we do to keep the lights on and pay Ed's heating bills and council tax changes that he wants to come down the line, but actually to kind of for the benefit of it. What does that look like? How do you indulge their passions? When is the right time to do that? All those kind of things. So the multi-generational thing adds a whole nother layer of complexity to it because it's not just how do I get to pop in my clogs with enough money there and then retiring. I think you have to kind of set hairs running, which is quite difficult to think, not just far enough ahead in your own life, but then into the later stages of your kids and their kids. It's a bit mind bending.
Yeah, you're right, Chris. And I think part of that planning is, have you got the right people in place? And again, one of the very early conversations that we have with winners is around making sure that they have a will and powers of attorney. And we would probably say that 95% of the winners don't have those legal structures in place, and they need to talk to people about establishing those as early as possible to give them that sort of legal framework and protection. I think beyond that, in relation to children and grandchildren and future generations, creating structures whereby you can allocate some of that wealth, even when the children are minors. So you can hold shares on their behalf within these structures that we've talked about, such as family investment companies. So you can start the process, Chris, albeit that you're not giving them direct control of the assets. I think a lot of the winners have come from very humble beginnings, and what they're trying to avoid very often is a situation where their children grow up thinking that they're never going to have to work again or at all. That it's the silver spoon.
The example that always sticks in my mind, I mean, it's not a lottery winner, but I think it was Duncan Bannatyne who was the one who came out and said at one point that his kids would only unlock bits of his wealth by doing basically noble professions like becoming a nurse or a fireman or something like that.
Oh, that puts pressure on passing those exams, doesn't it?
Well, Chris,
whole new ballgame.
If you're not capable, sorry, mate, 100 million down, whatever.
Oh God.
Which, I mean, that strikes me as quite novel, and there's probably an element of headline grabbing there with it. But I think it does. Yeah, that's the kind of the thing that people worry about, isn't it? You're just going to end up with kind of kids who don't care and they're rich, and they're never going to.
It's the kids that don't care. It's the kids that don't have an appreciation of money. It's avoiding scenarios where children grow up, they meet people, they get married, they get divorced. It's losing wealth through those events, unfortunately, or potential bankruptcies. So a lot of this is around the protection of the actual of the funds themselves, and whether that's ensuring that they stay within the families, or whether it's releasing income at various stages of children's lives to support them, perhaps with things like university. All of these things can be incorporated quite early on if you've got the right structures in place. But very often those structures are legal structures and not widely known in the sort of the retail space.
Yeah,
I'm envisaging some kind of succession style.
How not to nurture a trustafarian, basically, I think is what we're getting at here.
And yet be one ourselves, Ed.
Exactly. Yeah.
On your camping trip. So, don't do as we do as we say.
Yeah. Now, I think just before we finish, just a point on playing the lottery. Obviously, the lottery is a form of gambling. I don't have the odds in front of me, but they are minuscule. My own personal preference, I will say, is I don't play the lottery regularly. I'll see it occasionally. There's a big jackpot, and I'll maybe put £5 on it. Obviously, we don't encourage anybody to start putting down £50 a month, direct debits and that kind of thing, because it's just not really worth it. put that in an ISA and build for your future. Basically, and yeah, gambling is obviously a big problem. And we'll put some links to kind of gambling aware stuff in the show notes as well for anybody who's interested in that. Duncan, this is really actually fascinating discussion. So thank you very much for joining us. Really enlightening, actually.
You're welcome. Thank you. And good luck. Good luck for Friday.
I know. I'm gonna have to go get a ticket now. I think it sounds like Chris has probably got quite a lot already.
Just 2 lines, Ed, but they're the right ones.
So 2 lines, they're the right. Yeah. Okay. All right. And thank you, Chris, as well for joining me as ever.
My pleasure.
Thank you, everybody, for listening in. Do catch us up next week. Actually, we will be doing a pensions double bill. So we've got Standard Life talking to us about some pensions research they've done, plus something else about retirement, which I think is going to be a really, really enjoyable one. So do catch us next week. Thank you and goodbye. Don't forget to subscribe to the show on Spotify, Apple Podcast, or YouTube. You can also follow all our latest updates on TikTok, Instagram, or X. Finally, check out all our money stories on the Mouthy Money website and subscribe to our weekly newsletter for all the latest straight to your inbox. Thank you and goodbye.